Okay,
Hi everyone. Today we have Minh with us. I hope I pronounced your name right.
that is
Uh,
correct.
yeah, so he's a native Vietnamese speaker, and today let's learn about Vietnamese language. So, hi, Minh. Nice to have you on my channel.
Hi, Pratit and everyone. Nice to be here.
Right. So, one question that I had about Vietnamese language is that I thought that it's kind of similar to Chinese in a way that it has tones in the language. So how similar is it with Chinese?
So, what disclaimer in advance, I'm not a linguist. So, this is purely based on experience as a Vietnamese speakers. So, it's true that we both tonal language. I mean, you different tone, the pitch of the sound would make sort of like different meanings. And also true because of there's a long times that Vietnam was under the influence of China because of the
Mhm.
invasion. Um, so we adopt a lot of words, like, and from China. So, for
Mm.
example, we even have a branch of Vietnamese word, like you have everyday words, and then another branch that it's called like Han Viet is basically a Vietnamese word, but every one of us know that it has Chinese origin,
Mm.
and because of the influence, so that the emperors, right, like after, yeah, so we fought back the invasion, the emperor set up his kingdom, but
Mm.
they still adopt the script, the word. Basically, Chinese language became like the official language for that
Mm.
period of time. So
Mm.
that's why a lot of, we would say, academic words would
Okay.
usually have that origin. So yeah, so that's why people have that um, impressions that Vietnamese language and Chinese language are, although Chinese language have like they have different, right, Cantonese,
Mm.
so a different kind of Cantonese Mandarin, so it's already like diverse, and people tend to think that it's similar because it has some similarities and because
Mm.
of the history with it. uh, Although we have, let's say, the tone, then we have six tone, right? We have the flat one,
Mm.
and then we have six. Is that six tone? Yeah, six tone. So we have the flat one,
Mm.
the fall downs, the rising up, and then the kind of like a break, and then okay, I think I can say it, and you will know, like,
Yeah,
okay,
that
the
would be nice.
consonant is, let's say, letter N and A, right? So we got na, flat one, which basically mean the sweet apples, the fruit.
Mm.
And then we got na, like the falling down. We got na, which
Mm.
is rising up. And we got na, which is like a question mark. And
Okay.
na, which is like the, like you drop your voice. And then
Mm.
we got na, which is like a fall, like a up and then down and then up again. So that's
Okay.
the tone. So six tones in Vietnam. Although Vietnamese language or works like this. So we have the thing called tiếng. It's
Mm.
basically a consonant plus a vowel or a diphthong. So
Okay.
you put them together and it become like a unit of sound. I guess there would be more specific word, but I would just call it a unit of sound, right?
Mm.
And then that unit of sound could mean something, or it could not, or it may not mean anything,
Okay.
or one unit of sound could form a word, or two or three, usually just three unit of
Mm.
sounds form a word. For example, the word that I just said, na, means the sweet apple, but then na doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
Or the other one doesn't mean anything. But then the word, let's say ba, like ba, right? We got ba mean father. We got ba means grandmother. We got ba, but ba doesn't mean anything. But then you put them with another unit of sound, ba. It means dirty or lewd, you know, that kind of connotation of the word. So yeah, so that's how Vietnamese language works. So that's why most of my foreign speakers, when they hear me speaking Vietnamese, they would feel like a drum beat.
Okay.
Because it's like a consonant plus a vowel become a sound, right? And then they would hear like one sound and then another sound and then another sound. It's
So
not like.
could you tell a sentence, for example, so that we can observe that sound?
All right. Can you give me a sentence in English and I can translate it, like a short sentence in English?
Okay. Like, I went to the supermarket yesterday.
Okay. So in English, it sounds very stress based, right? Like there's a flow. Like I went to the supermarket yesterday. But then in Vietnamese, it becomes tôi đã đi chợ ngày hôm qua.
Okay.
It sounds like.
Yeah, I can observe the tones. Yeah.
Yeah, so they would usually say that it sounds like a drum beat. And also because of that, like you hear unit of sound. So for a non-Vietnamese speaker or someone who doesn't understand Vietnamese, they would only hear one block of sounds, like one after another, and there's no flow between them, and it's like.
Yeah.
But because Vietnamese, of course, we would understand it and we can, understand what it means. So that's how. And then because of all the sound, all the tones, makes it like up down. So some of them would say like it sounds like notes, in music. You have. So that's that's a different, I think, between Vietnamese and other language. Although, yeah, in order to compare it with Chinese language, it's that's the only thing that I could give the comparison to.
Right. So the next question is, before the French conquered Vietnam, what was the script that was used? Because currently you use the Latin script, right? So were you using a different writing system before?
Okay, so this is actually a misconceptions about. It's like the French brought the Latin script to Vietnam. So first of all, like no one can be sure whether we had the written language before. But before, like with all the Chinese invasion, some of the emperor, they do adopt the Chinese script language, and they try to use that and write Vietnamese sound, like to key down the Vietnamese words, and they call it Han Nom. It's basically like this. It's a writing system in like the Chinese writing system, but try to record Vietnamese word. It was now most of the information I will give you now is actually draw from a articles from a newspaper in Vietnam called Tuổi Trẻ. It's a media in Vietnam, a newspaper in Vietnam. Now, but that thing was very difficult because the researchers said that you need to understand, like a person need to be good, like really good at Chinese language before they can understand Hanum, and then they could write that using that script. So around 16 or 17th century, the missionaries, they went to Vietnam, and
Mm.
they needed a language, like a way to sort of like did their job, right? Because they were missionary. So there was the sort of like original conception, misconception, which I was learned about it at school, was a French missionaries named Alexander Roth,
Mm.
and he sort of like Latinized the Vietnamese language.
Mm.
Basically, he invented the writing system. But most of the sort of like recent understanding now, it was that he did create the first, well, not the first, but like the dictionary, the Portuguese, Latin, Vietnamese dictionary.
Mm.
So that's what he contributed. But the research that drawn from the articles reported that there's another missionary before him,
Mm.
was Francesco de Pina, and he's Portuguese.
Okay.
And the Vietnamese script, the modern Vietnamese script, was not a work of one person, but like for a few hundred years, a lot of different missionaries from uh, Portugal, Italy, French, they came to Vietnam, and they like slowly build up.
Mm.
Uh, Francesco de Pina was actually the first one, was like very fluent, and he did a lot of work into building or putting that together.
Mm.
And Alexander Roth was the one who sort of like inherit all those work.
Mm.
And the reason for that, for the misconception that Alexander Roth was the one who created Vietnamese, simply
Okay.
because he was French.
Right.
And the French government, like the colonial government, right, at that time, wanted
Mm.
to promote that. So that's why they, of course, they publish his work. They use his name to name street, because there's some street in Saigon, or there's one in Ho Chi Minh City
Mm.
that was named after him since the colonial time,
Mm.
but simply because he was French. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's, but either case, um, the the Vietnamese modern script, which we call it Quốc ngữ,
Mm.
was a major contribution to the Vietnamese language, because from that point, because it's easy to study, and it helps, like it started as a tool for colonialism, right?
Mm.
But then it became sort of like a tool for the Vietnamese to preserve our cultures, to promote that. So that was a good thing, because otherwise, I don't think I could study with the, Chinese script, because it's quite difficult. But
Yeah.
the Vietnamese script, the Latin script, makes it really easy. This is what I learned from when I was in school.
Mm.
We had, after the Independence Days, right? 1945, when we reclaimed the country, the Vietnamese government had a program to eradicate illiteracy in
Right.
Vietnam.
Right. Yeah.
So they also promote Quốc ngữ, because the way that it was built to key our language is
Mm.
easy to learn.
Yeah.
And someone, after they learned it for 3 months, or maybe a little bit more, but they would be able to write the Vietnamese word. Like,
Mm.
if I were to teach you Vietnamese, it would take you like a month. You
Mm.
would be able to read what is written, or read a
Mm.
book. You might not be able to understand what it was, right? Or it is like you can say the word out loud, but you have no idea what it means,
Yeah.
right? So that's how Vietnamese government at that time eradicate illiteracy because everybody can speak and understand the language already.
Mm.
So one person taught another person, and it would take like only like 3 months, and that person can teach other person the script. So
Mm.
now they can read all um, the broadcast, the propaganda, basically they would be able to read what the government want to tell them.
Yeah.
So that is how we, in 1945, that was one of the biggest sort of like success of the government at that time to eradicate illiteracy through the script.
Mm. So speaking about the French, there must be a lot of French words that are used in Vietnamese, right?
Oh
Could you
yeah.
list a few of them?
Oh yeah, that's a lot. Like, so, but think about like when the French came, they brought in with them things that maybe we didn't have it before.
Mm.
So usually in Vietnamese language, the words, the French origin words usually are nouns,
Mm.
like the word um, uh, concrete in English. In French, I think I pronounce it béton. In Vietnam, it's become béton,
Okay.
which is beton
So,
from French. Uh, Butter in English.
mhm.
In French is beurre, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, beurre, and in Vietnam it's beurre.
Okay.
It's the
And what
same.
about bread? I think bread as well, right? Like pain.
Uh, Bread is bánh mì. I think maybe bánh, pawn. It
Pain.
might be.
Yeah.
And then we got the word the tie in English.
Mhm.
I think in French it's cravat.
Cravat. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because in Vietnamese it's cravat.
Ah, right.
So the word in English is coffee, in French is café, right?
Yeah.
And in Vietnamese it's café.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of nouns that, because we didn't have those.
Mm.
So basically, whatever the French called it, we just, sort of like Vietnamize it.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's, I can give you a few example. Uh, but one of the things is that because now, like after the war,
Mm.
a lot of things have changed, right? And now that we actually have those things, from we understand it. So
Mm.
now some of the words, like the French origins, words that usually for like a specific word for things like the tide, the pedal, uh, things that you don't see it very often in real life. Like it's an old word
Mm.
already.
Mm.
Yeah. So yeah. So that's how the legacy of French colonials to Vietnam.
Okay. So another question is, Vietnam must have different ethnic languages as well, right? Like apart from the official language, how
Uh,
many are there, and are they like very different to each other?
yeah. So there are 54 ethnic cities in Vietnam. I'm
Mm.
from the majority, but there are minorities in Vietnam, and they all have their own languages.
Mm.
Although the majority of them can speak Vietnamese, like the official language,
Mm.
and they can speak it, they can understand it, but they have their own language.
Mm.
And this is because I don't have a lot of information about it, but the time that I worked in Laos, so I can say about one ethnicity, which is the Hmong.
Mm.
So Hmong people live in both Vietnam and Laos.
And Laos. Okay.
Yeah, like yeah, the border doesn't mean anything to them, right? The border
Mm.
is just a political things that we made up.
Mm.
But the Hmong people, they live in both sides of the mountain range. and they speak the same language. So it's funny that Hmong people, I think Hmong people from Laos can understand the Lao language and the Hmong language. Hmong people in Vietnam can understand their language and understand Vietnamese. Hmong people from both Laos and Vietnam can understand each other because I think they speak the same language.
Okay.
But that's that's kind of the thing. But yeah, so that's pretty much what I could say. I know that there are 54 ethnicities in Vietnam. They all have their own languages and their own culture, and they can speak our language, and we cannot speak theirs. I mean, like if somebody would study it, they would, but not me because I didn't understand their language.
Okay. So how similar is Vietnamese to Lao and Cambodian and Thai maybe?
Yeah. So because Vietnamese, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Khmer, right? The language in Cambodia originated from the Hmong Khmer origin, like a mother language of the region. So there's some similarity. All of those are tonal language, right? And then there would be, for example, by the time I work in Laos, I couldn't remember how many times, like so many times that I kind of like overheard people in Laos speaking in a distance. And I was so sure that it was Vietnamese.
Okay.
You know, like when you see mumbling and you see murmuring like from the distance. So I was so sure it was Vietnamese until I got closer to them. And it became clear to me that, oh, it was Laos. All right. So the sort of like the tone, the pattern makes a very similar impression. Although there are also the words that are basically identical. So in Lao language, for example, the word for cat, the cat is mèo in Lao language.
Okay.
It's the same in Vietnamese. A cat in Vietnamese is mèo, right? The rice in Vietnamese, we call it gạo. In Lao language, it's called khao.
Okay, similar.
So yeah, like you can hear some similarities. And then also the syntax is the same. Well, not, I wouldn't say it entirely the same, but very similar. The way that we make questions is the same. For example, in Vietnamese, if you want to ask someone, for example, if you ask them, have you eaten, right? Then in Vietnamese, it's become ăn cơm chưa. So ăn is eat.
Okay.
Cơm is meal. And chưa is a question, sort of like marker. So to put it in perspective, in English, there's inflected language, right? So you have like a auxiliary, you said have, and then you eaten, things like that. So that's how we as an English speaker can recognize that, oh, that's a question. In Vietnamese, there's a word chưa is also as a question, sort of like marker. In Lao language, it become kin khao bo. Kin mean eat, khao mean the meal or the rice, and then bo is the question marker. So you can see that the syntax is the same. The word could be different. So if I'm a Vietnamese speaking to a Vietnamese person, I want to ask that person, have you eaten? I said, ăn cơm chưa? And then in Lao language, it becomes kin khao bo.
Right.
So it's like the syntax is the same. So it was kind of funny. It now that you asked me that question, it kind of like brought me back to the memory in Laos, because I was there for only like, I mean, like what, it took me only a month or 2 months to be able to go to the market and sort of like buy stuff compared to my other friends like Filipinos, Americans, who had lived in Laos for like 4 years, 5 years. But because the syntax is so different from Lao language, so it took them a long time to be at the level that I could achieve in within a month or 2 months. It's simply because I just pick up the language, I know the words, or they would tell me the word, and I kind of like, oh, piece them together. So it's easier for me to understand or to study Lao language. So I guess that's it was sort of like due to the fact that Laos, Vietnamese are very similar because they came from the same ancestral language. So that's the good for me. If I could study Laos fast, then I guess if I wanted to, I could, you know, it would be easier for me, I think, to study Laos, a Thai language, compared to, let's say, study French, because it's completely different from my own language. Yeah.
So even within Vietnamese, there must be different dialects, right? Like I've heard the northern dialect is different from the southern one.
Yeah. So we have Vietnamese language has three main sort of like major dialects, although different province would speak slightly different, but it's usually the difference is in the way you pronounce word. It's just slightly off a little bit, that's all. So there are three majors: the northern one, the Hanoi accents, or the Hanoi dialect, which is my hometown, and then Hue dialect, which from the central Vietnam, and then the Saigon dialect, the southern Vietnamese dialect. The majority of Vietnamese could understand my dialect because it's on TV, major medias, so they could understand us. But for me, if I go to Saigon, because I lived in Saigon for a few years, so I understand them. And if I talk to anyone in Vietnam, especially, for example, the central Vietnamese region, it would take me like 10-15 minutes to an hour to be able to familiarize my ears, to like attune my head to that sound. Yeah, but it's not sort of like unintelligible or impossible for any person in Vietnam to not understand each other. It would take time to the further you are, because Vietnamese is like long, right? You get the north and the south. So the further you are from each other, I would say the longer it would take for you to attune each other's ears to the other's dialect. But yeah, it's not that different, because I like for my husband who speak his dialect or his language is Filipino or Tagalog, but they also have like hundreds of other and it's some would say dialect, but because they cannot understand each other, so it's basically languages. Yeah. So but that's not the case in Vietnam. I think almost every Vietnamese could understand each other, regardless of, maybe it would take more time for them to attune to each other's accent, dialects, but it would still be able to understand each other.
So another thing that I wanted to ask is, does Vietnamese have genders? Because I noticed that in the other Southeast Asian languages, they don't have any gender inflection.
No. So Vietnamese is a non-inflected language, meaning that the words doesn't change regardless of the grammatical function it serves, right? So like English, you have his, him, her,
Mm. Mm.
she become her or hers, right? So Vietnamese, every word stay the same.
Mm.
We have words like wife, vợ. It has like a imply that that's a woman.
Mm.
But other than that, we don't have genders in our language.
Mm.
I guess that in French it's like le, la,
Yeah.
right? Different. Every noun has a gender.
That's complicated, actually.
It's quite complicated, and we I guess we were lucky to not have that features because
Yeah.
although in Vietnamese you might need to what you call it, you add gender markers,
Mm.
like if you talk to a person, you would, for example, you talk to an auntie, you
Mm.
call her cô, but then the word uncle in Vietnamese
Mm.
is bác, but
Okay.
then the word bác can also mean aunt,
And
but
yeah.
like an older, the aunt who is your parents' sister, like older sibling, is
Right.
an
Right.
aunt,
Yeah.
right? And that aunt is called bác,
Mm-hmm.
right? So basically, but then an aunt, but who that aunt is a younger sibling of your parents,
Mm.
then it's cô.
Mm.
So basically, the word bác in Vietnam could mean a male older siblings of your parents or a
Mm.
female older sibling of your parents.
Okay.
So for that word, if you want to specify that, then
Mm.
you have the gender marker guy,
Mm.
like bác guy is like a female. So the word guy means a female, and the
Mm.
word trai means male. So
Okay.
you would add that markers to make it clear,
Mm.
but you don't have to,
Okay.
just to make it clear. That's all.
Is it like a new addition to the language, or was it always there?
I think it has always been there.
So getting to the last bit, like, do you have any interesting facts about Vietnamese language or culture that you'd like to share?
Okay, so this is usually one of the most complicated things for non-Vietnamese speaker is there's no you, right? The pronouns
Mm.
is complicated because we do have a pronouns for the word you, like I is tôi, and then you is bạn.
Mm.
Although that is sort of like an addition when they need translation.
Mm.
But tôi now it's become normal. Like I would call somebody, you know, I would sort of like address myself as tôi, and
Mm.
I would address to you as bạn. But
Mm.
that's the it's become it has became sorry, it has become like normal now.
Mm.
But for Vietnamese, when we talk to each other,
Mm.
the relationship between the speakers would dictate the pronouns that you would use.
Mm.
So let's make it like give an example, right? For
Okay.
example, you let's just say you're older than me and you're a female. Sorry, you're a male. So I would call you anh,
Mm-hmm.
and I would address myself as em, a younger person than
Okay.
you.
Mm.
If the person that I'm talking to is an older female, then I
Mm.
would address that person as chị,
Okay.
and then I call myself em.
Mm.
But then if that person is younger than me, then I would address that person as em, right?
Mm.
I would address my mom as mom, right? Mẹ. And
Mm.
then bố, father. Uh, and then I call a older person as bác.
Mm.
right? But then that person must be older than my mom and dad.
Okay.
If they are younger than my mom and dad, then I would call them cô for a female and
Mm.
chú for a male,
Okay.
right?
So the terms that you said before, like for aunt and uncle, right?
Yeah.
So,
You also have a pronouns. It's
mm,
called, I would not use it for you because it becomes disrespect.
okay.
If I call it, that thing is my,
Mm,
it's like you, but like very casual, very informal,
mm,
right? So that would what people would call friends, all right? Like between close friends, they would call each other that
mm,
as a sort of like an uh, what you call it, intimate way of calling your friends.
mm,
But then that's very, because now that I think about it, it's weird because the word mày and tao,
mm.
tôi become tao, and the other person, I will not point to you because it becomes disrespect, but I call it mày to my close friend, right?
Okay.
But then if two strangers
Mm,
calling each other tao and mày,
mm,
it becomes disrespectful, like an insult to each other.
mm,
So it's very weird that the same pronouns, tao mày, is an intimate thing between friends, but an
mm.
insult with,
Stranger.
strangers. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's very weird. And now if things to call like dogs and cat, I think it's depends on, how that person view
Mm,
their pet. If they love it, they would call it even con, like treat that dogs or cat as if that would be their children.
mm,
And another interesting thing from Vietnamese language that I also noticed it in Tagalog, my
mm,
husband's language, is we have the word za or
mm,
a, and it's more of a honorary marker.
mm,
If I talk to you and I say Zach, and then I would answer you, it's because I'm showing my
mm,
respect to you. It's
mm,
like in Tagalog, there's a word po, right?
mm,
Like they add it to show respect to the listener. So it's the same thing in Vietnam. We have that markers to show the respect to the elder, to other people, if you want to show respect.
mm,
Although I noticed that in Tagalog, in my husband's language, they use po for almost everyone. Like just show respect to everyone. But in Vietnamese, it could be weird if I use it to a kid, like I use a
okay.
word za to
Okay.
talk to a children, because it more like the children would show respect to the elder,
Mm,
hierarchical structure.
mm.
So that's the interesting things that I picked up from my language, and compare it with Tagalog or other languages.
So, thank you for uh, accepting my invitation to be on this channel. And I think I learned a lot about Vietnamese language today.
Glad to be of help.